Asmat Guru Bhyo Namaha, Asmat Parama Guru Bhyo Namaha, Asmat Sarva Guru Bhyo Namaha. We're continuing on with Agamas and South Indian Vaishnavism by Vivavas of Dr. Vivavas of the French Indological Institute in Pondicherry. And we just finished a whole chapter on authenticating Pancharatra Agama after a general study of the Agamas, a general explanation of what Agama means and what the different types of Agamas are. We've honed in on the Vishnu Agamas, Vaikhanasa Agama we discussed, and now we discussed Pancharatra Agama and its authenticity. And now we're going to talk about the doctrines and practices of the Pancharatra Agama. So if we look here, chapter 6, Pancharatra Agama doctrines. The Pancharatra system is called also as the Sattvata Shastra, right? Sattvata, meaning sattvic or sattvata. And there's also, as we know, as we've discovered, that there's one of the great samhitas, one of the most important samhitas in the Pancharatra canon is the Sattvata Samhita. So it's called Sattvata Shastras. And people who follow it can be called Sattvatas, actually. Anyway, there are other systems also having the name Pancharatra with some attributes, such as the Ganesh Pancharatra, Devi Pancharatra, and others. There's also a system called Saptaratra, which would mean 7 nights instead of 5 nights. So we have a quotation here that explains something about that from Agni Purana. In all these cases, the word ratra must be taken to stand for day and night, ahoratra, ahoratra. This indicates that the explanation of the name Pancharatra should be traced to sources other than which is suggested by Professor Van Buitenen. So Van Buitenen, we discussed in previous chapter, we discussed some of the different theories by Western Indologists, and that came up. Anyway, we're not so much interested right now. And if you want to know more about the authenticity and the meaning of the word Pancharatra, please go to the previous lessons because that's all covered there. We're going to try and get into the doctrines of the Pancharatra. Many a stream of thought has converged to form a synthesis to serve as the basis of the edifice of the Pancharatra system. The Vedic concept of ritual gives a religious background for offering worship. The Quranic theory of Brahman, Brahma, let's say Brahma as the creator, brings in the creation of the cosmic embryo and his birth there as Hiranyagarbha. So I guess it's not quite sure whether it's referring to Brahma or Chaturbhuka Brahma, the secondary creator, or Brahma in the sense of the Supreme Lord. That the ultimate reality is partless, subtle, and manifests itself in the form of the world is traceable to the contents of the Upanishads. The principles of the evolution of matter into the world are incorporated to explain the process of material creation, which is based on the Sankhya system. The Sa-Ishvara Sankhya system is two Sankhya systems, one which admits the existence of God and one which does not. So the one that admits the existence of God, that's actually accepted in Vaishnavism. So accepted also in the Pancharatra system, this system of evolution of matter, the creation of the material universe. The disciplines of meditation are derived from the yoga system, right? Because remember, we were talking about there's 4 different subject matters which are covered in Pancharatra, and they are jnana, which is going to give you the creation of the universe and tattva and what's going on. That's according to the Sankhya system. Then yoga, which is going to talk about different forms of meditation, especially with regards to internal meditation on the chakras within the body, as a meditation on the universe, both externally and internally, and so that's based on the yoga system, Patanjali's Ashtanga yoga system, and then we have kriya and charya, which are more study these days, when people are studying Agamas, they're really studying those two sections mostly, which are to do with building temples and establishing deities and performing daily and occasional rituals with those deities. So the manifestation of the ultimate reality in the form of sentient and insentient beings, the worship of the deity mentally and outwardly, so inwardly and outwardly, the internal worship, the manasika puja or manasika radhana, and the external, the bahya puja or radhana, the installation of deities, the elaborate procedure for the construction of temples and the conduct of festivals owe their origin to Agama traditions. These sources have been fully utilized to blend harmoniously and carry out the one purpose of serving God. The Pancharatra texts are called Upanishads and Samhitas, right, to indicate their Vedic foundations. For this Agama is based on the Ekayana recension of the Mula Shaka. Mula Shaka means the root. Shaka means branch, so the trunk, right? The root of a tree is the biggest branch, is the trunk from which all the other branches come off, which is the Ekayana, or the one recension, the one branch of the Veda that was then turned into four by Vedavyasa, and Shukla Yajur Shaka. So it's considered to be the Shukla Yajur Veda. This belongs to the Kanva recension of the Shukla Yajur Veda. That's interesting because in North Central India, we have the Madhyandina Shukla Yajur Veda, which is according to the Vajrasena Samhita. And in South India, we have also Shukla Yajur Veda, but it's mostly belongs to the Kanva Shaka, or the Kanva branch. And the chanting of these two Yajur Vedas is quite different, although the text is the same. There's a Gurukul set up by the Kamkodipit Shankaracharya's Matam in Kanchipuram that teaches the Shukla Yajur Veda Kanva Shaka. So Kanva Shaka is there in South India also. But more generally, we get the Krishna Yajur Veda, the Taittiriya Krishna Yajur Veda, rather than the Shukla Yajur Veda. But here it's talking about the original Veda was the Kanva version of the Shukla Yajur Veda. So why is it called Mula Shaka is clear from the following passage. This following passage comes from Parasara Samhita. The Agama is also known as Siddhanta. It is of four kinds, according to the nature of deities to be worshipped. They are Agama Siddhanta, Mantra Siddhanta, Tantra Siddhanta, and Tantrantara Siddhanta. Another list mentions Mantra Siddhanta as the first to be followed by Agama Siddhanta. So either Agama Siddhanta or Mantra Siddhanta comes first, but there are these four kinds of Siddhantas. Siddhanta means a conclusion, four types of ways of worship here given in the Agamas. According to the Agama Siddhanta, worship is offered to the four vyuhas. Now the vyuhas again in Pancharatra are Vasudeva, Sankarshana, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. They're called Chaturvyuha because there's four of them. And we saw that in the Vaikhanasa system, there were five emanations of God, also called vyuhas, and they had different names. So according to the Agama Siddhanta, worship is first offered to the four vyuhas. Worship of Keshava, Narayana, and others, representing the 12 forms of the Lord, comes under the Mantra Siddhanta. Okay, so Agama Siddhanta, according to this, deals with the worship of deities of Vasudeva, Sankarshana, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. There are expansions of those four, 3 expansions of each one of them, which are the 12 deities Keshava to Damodar, Keshava, Narayana, Madhava, Govinda, Vishnu, Madhusudana, Trivikrama, Vamana, Sridhara, Rishikesha, Padmanabha, Damodara. Right, and these are called Upa-vyuhas. So they're not vyuhas, they're not the main vyuhas, but they're expansions of the main vyuhas. So they're called Upa, or smaller, subsidiary vyuhas. So according to the Agama Siddhanta, we have the worship of the original vyuhas. According to the Mantra Siddhanta, we worship the Upa vyuhas. So we might find in temples, original vyuhas, Vasudeva, Sankarshana, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. We might also find these other forms, Keshava, Narayana, up to Damodar. And so there's Mantra Siddhanta means worship of them. worship of a single form is enjoined in the Tantrantra Siddhanta. So Tantrantra Siddhanta would be the worship of a single form. It doesn't exactly say what single form it is. So it would be a type of Ekanta Bhakti where the Vaishnava or the worshipper, in this case a Vaishnava, is worshipping one particular form of Vishnu, right? So here it says the Tantra Siddhanta prescribes a form of worship for a worship of forms like Narasimha and others. Narasimha and others, they are considered avatars. They are considered to be there. So in the different 5 forms of God, according to the Pancharatra system, we have Karnika, or what's also called Para, the original form of God. Then we have Vyuha, means the four Vyuhas, the expansions, or we can say the Para is the first, and the other 3 are the other 4 make up 4, right? Sankarshana, Padrimana, right? So then we have the expansions, right? Karnika Vyuha, Para Vyuha, Vibhava. Vibhava is what we're coming to now. So Tantra Siddhanta prescribes the worship of one of the Vibhava forms. So if somebody worships Krishna, or somebody worships Rama, or somebody worships Narasimha, etc., or Hayagriva, etc., they worship that one form, and they have fixed devotion on that one form. That is called Tantra Siddhanta. Tantrantra Siddhanta. The Hayagriva Samhita mentions the Agama Siddhanta. So I thought we already discussed the Agama Siddhanta as being worship of the viewers, but the Agama Siddhanta is helpful to get moksha. The Mantra Siddhanta gives the fruits of undertakings, right? So gives us some fruits of that we want to attain, not necessarily moksha, and moksha, right? So we have other aims that we do worship the Lord for, as well as moksha. So those persons who are doing Agama Siddhanta, worshipping the original Vyuha forms, right? Paran Vyuha, let's say, right? They are only interested in moksha, but the person who does Mantra Siddhanta, who is worshipping the Upavyuha forms, right? Keshava Damodar, he is not only wanting moksha, but he also wants some other results from his worship, some other fruits from his worship. The Tantra Siddhanta grants the 4 kinds of objects of life, which are Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. And the Tantrantra, which was fixed on one particular form, like in the Paravyu of Vibhava, one particular of the Vibhava forms of God, right, is called Tantrantra Siddhanta, and that grants desired results. Desired results, not necessarily moksha. Okay, so the Satvara system is classified under 10 heads, each having the name Samhita. They are Bhagavat Samhita, Karma Samhita, Vidyamayi Samhita, Kala Samhita, Kartavya Samhita, Vaisheshiki Samhita, Samyama Samhita, Adhikara Samhita, Marga Samhita, and Moksha Samhita. These do not seem to be independent names of any texts or systems, but only 10 topics which are dealt with in the system. They could be identified as those treating about the nature of God, acts of worship, knowledge of tattva or principles, time for worship, right, which the correct time for worship, which times we have to avoid as being bad times to perform worship, rituals, which are done from time to time, which means naimittika karmas, occasional acts, specific acts, so that would be kamya karmas, done for a particular purpose or a particular fruit or result, yoga, which is also got to do with the meditation on the Supreme and meditation on the internal spiritual form of the Lord, and also of the makeup in the body of the chakras, qualifications for initiation and means of moksha respectively. Okay, so these are these different topics. So the system will deal with what is wholesome to man, a system which is classed, a system can deal, sorry, excuse me, can't read the writing here. A system can deal with what is wholesome to man by prescribing the means to get rid of worldly misery. It is necessary to find out the means which would provide man with this tattva jnanam, or knowledge of principles, and karma, or work, right, are considered to be the two means of which help to obtain what is beneficial for man. So that's not unusual. Tattva jnana means knowledge, or anyway, knowledge of principles. So we say knowledge and karma, knowledge and action are the things which help us. So it's very common that we see in the Bhagavad Gita talks about knowledge and action being assistant to bhakti. Okay, so karma is twofold. According as it leads directly or indirectly to tattva jnana. So karma will lead us to jnana, and jnana will lead us to bhakti. The actual worship which is offered to the Lord is the direct means, so the actual upasana or the sadhana or the worship of the Lord, while others which contribute to it are indirect ones. So this karma and jnana, these can be other auxiliary aspects that lead to the bhakti or lead to the upasana, the worship of God. The Sattvada system is concerned with the direct method of worship, and as such is considered the best amongst the systems. The ultimate reality of the Pancharatra in the Pancharatra Agama is Brahman, characterized by bliss and free from all undesirable qualities. So he has unlimited auspicious qualities and no undesirable ones. So he's called Nirguna because he has no undesirable qualities. He's without blemish. And he is characterized by bliss. So he's completely blissful. So here we have a quotation from Jayakya Samhita and Parameshwara Samhita. And it says, it is beyond the reach of all beings. Out of this issues the first form of God. Okay, so this is an understanding of an idea of Brahman. So we have here Rupa Madhyam Sanatanam, called Vasudeva, the first form of God, called Vasudeva. Vasudeva is understood as para, the para or the Kainkarya, Karnika, not Kainkarya, Karnika, the original form of God. Called Vasudeva in the subtle form with two hands. So note that this is called Paravasudeva. So this Vasudeva is Paravasudeva, and he has two hands, not four hands, crystal-like in complexion and clad in yellow garments. It is he's seated in the heart of beings and is the highest light seen by Brahma in meditation. So by Chaturmukha Brahma, right, the first creator, he sees this form of God in his meditation. From this Shukshma Vasudeva, okay, so we're talking about different forms of Vasudeva. From this Shukshma or this subtle Vasudeva, there arises the four-armed Stula Vasudeva. Stula Vasudeva means a more gross form of Vasudeva, right? And Narayana. They come out from the Shukshma Vasudeva. The Stula Vasudeva is known as Paravasudeva. Okay, so he's saying here the Stula Vasudeva is called Paravasudeva, right? Okay, my understanding was the original form is called Paravasudeva. Okay, so he's saying that this is the secondary form. According to some Samhitas, I guess it must be saying it's a secondary form after the subtle form of the original Vasudeva, the two-handed Vasudeva. So this is a four-handed Vasudeva that comes from the two-handed Vasudeva, Paravasudeva. This is called Paravasudeva. From whom springs Vyuha Vasudeva. Vyuha Vasudeva. So we have a third Vasudeva form, right? And from this Vyuha Vasudeva comes Sankarshana, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. So Sankarshana emerges from Vyuha Vasudeva. Pradyumna emerges from Sankarshana, and Aniruddha from Pradyumna. Right. So we have this idea, which is propounded in Parameshwara Samhita, let's say, and some other texts of the Pancharatra Agama, is that the Brahman, from the Supreme, right, emanates this Shukshma Vasudeva, from Shukshma Vasudeva, Stula Vasudeva, Shukshma Vasudeva having 2 arms, Stula Vasudeva having 4 arms, Vyuha Vasudeva, presumably also with 4 arms, and then from him comes Sankarshana, from Sankarshana comes Pradyumna, from Pradyumna comes Aniruddha, and there you have the 4 Vyuhas. The 4 Vyuhas comprising Vyuha Vasudeva, Sankarshana, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha constitute Chatur Brahman. This is called Chatur Brahman, the 4 aspects of Brahman, and they, together with Paravasudeva form, which is the Stula Vasudeva that came out from the Shukshma Vasudeva, form Pancha Brahman. Okay, so these are all different terminologies for grouping together different forms of God. The word Brahman, which is derived from the root Br, meaning to increase or to grow, is taken to mean the unlimited nature of the attributes and the essential nature Swarupa, which means his own form. This word is used to denote all the above-mentioned emanations of the ultimate reality. In particular, it is employed to refer to the subtle and gross forms called Vasudeva, the subtle and gross forms. So subtle Vasudeva and gross Vasudeva. The subtle and gross forms, just because it's a gross form doesn't mean that it's not completely sattvic, completely pure, or we can say even above sattvic, Suddha sattvic, completely pure. Right, so Vasudeva, Paravasudeva, Vyuha Vasudeva, and Narayana, Bhagavan, Vasudeva, Vishnu, and Narayana are generally deemed to indicate one and the same supreme being. But these are all different forms of that same supreme deity. Lakshmi is ever with Brahman. She is the state of existence or bhava, and Narayana, identical with Brahman, is the existent reality. He's saying Narayana here is existent reality, is the principle of reality, right? And Lakshmi is the state of existence, the state of existence. So the two combine together to constitute Brahman. So he's given a quotation here from Lakshmi Tantra 2.15, which says, in this state, she is not differentiated from him and is said to constitute with him the non-dual Brahman. She is called also by the name Shakti. So if we understand the word Shakti meaning power, and God is Shaktiman, or the possessor of that power, God has certain powers. So God is the person, and God has attributes. He has unlimited attributes. But his essential attribute, his essential power, this attribute is Lakshmi, right? So you can't separate a substance from an attribute. If you have a brown pen, then you can't separate the brownness from the pen, the penness, right? There's an object which has the color brown, and it is the object of a pen. You can't separate it, but you can say that the object is a pen. And you could say the quality of the object or the attribute of the object is it's brown, right? So just in the same way, we call the Supreme Lord as non-dual Brahman, but she, Lakshmi, is ever associated with him as his attribute, like that. Now, ultimately, the world and the souls are also attributes of God. Everything is an attribute of God. So distinguishing between Lakshmi and the other attributes of God is where different Vaishnava sects have some different ideas. But in any case, if we read Lakshmi Tantra, it mentions it like this. It tries to mention it like this. So that's the way we can understand it. Now, also from Lakshmi Tantra, it mentions the two are inseparable, linked to each other, and so one cannot exist without the other. Okay, so that's understandable. The energy or the Shakti cannot exist without the energetic, right? So for instance, if you have a battery has energy. You can't have the energy without the battery. You can't have the battery without the energy, right? Because they're linked in the sense that one is the physical thing, one is the actual item, and one is an attribute of the item, the energy. Right. The relationship between the two may be said to be one of identity, right? So the identity of energy with the battery. Nobody can question that. Again, from Lakshmi Tantra, we have some more quotations from 217b to 18a. The ultimate nature of Brahman and Lakshmi is that of knowledge. The ultimate nature of Brahman and Lakshmi is that of knowledge. Okay, so that's another statement from Lakshmi Tantra. We have another statement from Lakshmi Tantra, 225b. Lakshmi is known by several names, such as Ananda, meaning bliss, Ananda, and a long A at the end here, meaning it's a feminine word. Swatantra. Swatantra means independent. There are several Vaishnava sects who would disagree with calling Lakshmi by the name independent, because they don't consider her to be independent, just as we don't really consider the attribute to be independent we don't consider the power to be independent from the powerful, or the energy to be independent from the energetic. We just got through saying that. So Swatantra may be accepted by some people as a name here of Lakshmi. Okay, so these are all names which are given to Lakshmi. Shri, we know, means all beautiful. Auspicious. Padma, Padma, like a lotus. Kamala, like a lotus. Kundalini. Anahata. Anahata is the name of a chakra within the body. Gauri is normally a name of goddess Parvati, Devi. Gayatri is another name for another goddess, the goddess of the Gayatri mantra. Gayatri. Shiva with a long A, meaning Uma or Parvati, the wife of Lord Shiva. Tara, which we hear most often in Vajrayana Buddhism, the goddess Tara, right? So there's a goddess Tara, but it could also be there in Hinduism. Rati is the wife of, usually the consort of Kamadev, the goddess to Cupid, the Hindu Cupid, right? So she is, Rati is desire, and others. So these are all different names of Lakshmi. Brahman is called by several names, such as Paramatman. Paramatman usually refers to Supersoul. Bhagavan, the possessor of these 6 auspicious qualities, and many others. Vasudeva, Ananta, Prabhava, Hiranyagarbha, Shiva, also with a long A here, but in this case, not feminine, and others. That Shri and Vishnu alone are meant to be, by these, receives elucidation from the Vishnu Purana, which declares that every male being represents Vishnu and every female represents Shri. Interesting. So there's a statement here in Vishnu Purana. Let's see. This is Vishnu Purana 1.8.35 says that's an interesting sloka. So in one sense, every male being, every male animal, every male human being like that, because of its maleness, represents Vishnu, and also every female, in one sense, every female being represents Lakshmi, like that, because they're the original yin and yang, they're the original male and female. So the principles of maleness and femaleness come from them. And so we find this also even in the marriage ceremony, the Vivavas samskara, the vara and the bride, the bridegroom and the bride are considered to be Lakshmi Narayana on the day of the marriage, and they're worshipped in that way. The father of the bride is going to worship the vara puja. He's going to worship the new son-in-law like Vishnu. They're considered to be like Lakshmi Narayana. So real identity and non-duality are predicated between Lakshmi and Vishnu in these texts, yet the two are stated to be different in order to preserve the transcendental character of Vishnu. She is said to represent the attribute, Dharma, and Vishnu, who possesses it, the Dharmin. So Dharmin means the possessor of Dharma, and Dharma is an attribute. So from the Ahirbudna Samhita 325 and 20 to 26a, we have this quotation. It says, Brahman is held to be attributeless, right? Actually, This is a misnomer because normally he's called Nirguna, but Nirguna means he has no negative attributes. He has only positive attributes, which means that it does not have any attribute which is of a material kind. Yes, material attributes he doesn't have. This does not mean that God does not have any gunas or any attributes. Brahman has indeed 6 qualities, namely Jnana, Aishwarya, Bala, Virya, Shakti, and Tejas, which is knowledge, leadership, strength, courage, power, and effulgence. So of these, Jnana is a non-inert, eternal, and self-luminous quality. Aishwarya is lordship, which is the activity that is unchecked and is not dependent on anything external to it. Bala is strength, which is defined as the absence of fatigue. Virya is virility, which is unchanging, in spite of being the material cause. Shakti is potency, which becomes the material cause of the world. Tejas is splendor or might, which is capable of inflicting defeat on others without an external help. These 6 gunas make up the body of Vasudeva and Lakshmi. So according to the Ahirvudna Samhita 625a, the Lord is called Bhagwan because he has 6 gunas, these 6 gunas which we just mentioned. Brahman is described as Sadguna. Sad means 6. Having these 6 as essential qualities. This is not surprising since this depiction is based upon an Upanishadic passages like this, like the following. And this Upanishadic comes from TV. Could be Talavaku Upanishad. TV, I'll have to look up. URST. TV, TU, TU, no, that's TU at Taittiriya Upanishad, but it says TV here. So I don't really know what it means. Okay, so anyway, so there's a couple of statements here. Anando Brahmiti Vajjanat. Okay, so Anando Brahmiti Vajjanat comes from Taittiriya Upanishad. Yeah. Anando Brahmati Vajjana, which illustrate the Brahma Sutra, and he's quoting a Brahma Sutra here. The Upanishadic doctrine that Brahman has no limitations due to space, time, and objects is accepted by the Pancharatra Agama also. There is a brilliant description of this in the following sloka, which comes from Ahirvudna Samhita 247. Colors, dimensions, sizes, conditions, temperatures, and movements are all shown in the succeeding sloka or verse to demonstrate the unconditional nature of Brahman. 35 principles or categories, tattvas, are stated to be admitted in the Sattvada system. They are God, supermundane space, Purusha, Shakti, Niyati, Kala, Sattva, Te, Rajas, Tamas, Sattva, Rajas, Tamas, Maya, Prasuti, Prakriti, Buddhi, Manas, Ahankara, 10 cognitive and cognitive, so organs, so 10 knowledge acquiring organs and 10 working organs, right? 5 subtle and 5 gross elements. Among them, God is referred to as Bhagwan, which implies his possession of the 6 gunas or attributes, and all emanations such as Vyuha, Vivava, and others. So Para, Vyuha, Vivava, Antaryami, and Anacha. Right. The supermundane space is Param Vyoma, generally referred to by the word Paramakasha. Paramakasha means the spiritual world or the spiritual sky, Parama Vyoma, and is the place of God. So it corresponds to Sri Vaikuntham. Purusha is Hiranyagarbha, representing the aggregate of individual selves. He is omniscient and omnipresent, and from a part of him, all the eternal selves emanate. They get absorbed into him at the time of dissolution. They emanate from his body at the time of creation, and they come back into his body at the time of dissolution, and they sleep there for some period in what's called Sushupti, or dreamless sleep, very deep dreamless sleep. Shakti is Lakshmi. Niyati is Mahavidya, right? Also named for a goddess, who represents the sattvika form of Shri, the sattvika form of Shri, and is the source of the world and of speech. So she could also be Mahavidya. Another name would be Mahasaraswati or Saraswati. Right. Kala, or Mahakali, representing the tamasa aspect of Shri. So what he's saying here is that there's a sattvic aspect Shri, a rajasic and a tamasic. The sattvic aspect is Lakshmi. The rajasic aspect is Saraswati, and the tamasic aspect is Mahakali, or probably Parvati Devi, the wife of Shiva. So, and it springs from niyati, which is only the form of time. So all of these spring from time. While the latter controls and regulates the intellectual abilities and practices of every being, the former takes everything to its stage of fruition. Maya, Prasuti, and Prakriti are tamas, avyakta, and Prakriti, respectively. So, Maya is tamas, Prasuti is avyakta, unmanifest, and Prakriti is Prakriti. Okay. The rest are the same as those dealt with in the Sankhya system. So these are some additions made in the Pancharatra Agama to the categorization of the Sankhya system. Brahman is Narayana, single, pure, and flawless. It is undefinable, matchless, integrated, and undifferentiated. It differentiates itself as the possessor of Shakti, or Shaktiman, or the possessor of Shakti, or power, and has Shakti herself, and as Shakti herself. So it differentiates itself into Shakti and Shaktiman, the power and the possessor of the power. Shakti is defined as the subtle condition of anything that exists. It does not exist away from the thing. So it's inherent in the Shaktiman, and the thing is Shakti, because the Shakti is an attribute of the thing. It experiences, its existence there is known only by the effects. Each manifestation of life has a Shakti, right? Inseparably connected to it, with it. There is one omnipresent Shakti called Lakshmi. She is connected with him as moonlight is with the moon and sunshine is with the sun. She differs from him like the attribute from that which possesses it, and existence from that which exists. They are inseparable like being and becoming. And I-ness and I. Lakshmi and is his essential nature, right? His attribute. Like Narayana, she too has a form made up of the 6 gunas, and so he's called Bhagavan, she's called Bhagavati. So in the Lakshmi Tantra 448a, it says, like him, she is transcendental. She acts under his direction. She has no existence apart from him, and at the same time, she has an identity of her own. Right. So again, from Lakshmi Tantra 15.9.10, there's a description here that says, creation, protection, destruction, obstruction, and showing grace are stated to be the 5 functions of God. So what are the 5 functions of God? Creation, protection, destruction, obstruction, right? And showing grace, right? Are the 5 functions of God, and are also declared to be those of Lakshmi. It must be understood that without Lakshmi or Shakti, the power, the ultimate reality is incapable of doing anything, nor can she do anything without him. Logically, whatever activity takes place in the attribute is taken to be happening in the Dharman also. The Dharma is the owner and control of the attribute. So whatever Lakshmi does is attributed to Vishnu himself. It is in this light that the sense of the passages mentioning the same 5 functions as to be undertaken by both Vishnu and Lakshmi should be understood. So again, Lakshmi Tantra 11, 6b and 7 says, it is thus found that Shakti, which is latent in the ultimate reality, is taken in the Vaishnava Agamas, including the Vaikhanasa Agamas, as identical with Shri and called by several names such as Maya, Prakriti, Lakshmi, and others. In the emanations, it is manifested and is never disassociated from Vishnu. This concept is opposed to that of the Sankhya system, in which matter or Prakriti is distinct from Purusha. So in the Sankhya system, Purusha and Prakriti are separate. Here, we see them to be the same. Vishnu and Lakshmi are ever associated with each other as attribute and attribute, as the one who owns the attribute or the one who controls the attribute. This concept is opposed in the Sankhya system, right, of matter, Prakriti, which is distinct from Purusha, the individual self, and is inert, right? It is animate, and from it arise the selves and the material world. Its non-separation from Vishnu is helpful in maintaining Vishnu as the material cause of the world. That Brahman itself changes into the world is against the unchanging nature of Brahman, right? This is one problem in philosophy that we call, and Vaishnavas who follow the Pancharatric system, even the Vaikhanasa system, we believe in Parinamavad, that Brahman does actually transform itself into the world. And then there has to be an explanation, therefore, how Brahman remains the same. Lakshmi is the Dharma of Brahman, and she's identical with Prakriti. And any change occurring there may be attributed to Brahman, but it does not occur actually in Brahman. The ultimate reality is Vasudeva, called by several names, and is tranquil, without activity, changeless and ever existent. It has no limitation of any kind and is the source of very vast divine powers. Shakti, also known as Lakshmi, is latent in him. It is necessary to explain how the worlds have come into being from him or at his instance, since he is totally inactive. An independent resolve flashes forth in him, who orders the latent Lakshmi to activate herself, which the Agamic tradition describes as opening of the eyes, right? Just like we do the opening of the eyes, the Netramulanam in the Pranapratishtha ceremony or installing of the deities of God. This is like the moon rising out of the ocean. It is only the will of Brahman to create. So he doesn't have to actually do anything. He just has to will it, and it happens. So also from the Lakshmi Tantra 2, 22b to 23a, it says, this Shakti is of two kinds, namely Kriya and Bhuti. The former is action, Kriya, that is Kriya, and is represented by the Sudarshana, the wheel, discus wheel, or chakra, of the discus of Lord Vishnu. The other is becoming, Bhuti is becoming, which is the universe. The former is energy and the latter is matter. When Shakti is said to become active, what is meant is that Lakshmi makes her presence felt. The Bhuti part, right, that is the universe, is impelled by Kriya, by the action, and so the world comes into being by these two working together. Creation is a continuous process and cannot be uniform in its nature. It must have some stages marked by specific changes which occur at long intervals. They are evidenced in the Agamic tradition by three kinds of creation, called Shuddha or pure, Mishra or mixed, and Ashuddha as impure. It sets in impelled by some independent resolve of Vishnu. So the Shuddha creation is so called because no impurity of matter of any scope there's no impurity of matter to tarnish it. The three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas, or goodness, passion, and ignorance, are not present in Brahman, who is hence said to be free from the gunas. Free from the gunas, otherwise called nirguna. So when there is a manifestation of Lakshmi, there is said to come a stage when the six gunas make their appearance. These gunas, namely Jnana, Aishwarya, Shakti, Bala, Virya, and Tejas, are non-material gunas. These are not material gunas, unlike the three material gunas, which are sattva, rajas, and tamas. Right. When Shakti becomes active, the six qualities make their appearance. Conjointly, they form the body of Vishnu, who gets there by the name Vasudeva. They work also in groups. Jnana, Aishwarya, and Shakti form one group, which is called Vishrama Bhumi. Vishvama Bhumi or Vishrama Bhumi? Vishrama Bhumi. Vishrama Bhumi. Bala, Virya, and Tejas constitute another group called Shrama Bhumi. So we have Vishrama Bhumi and Shrama Bhumi. This means that the latter group is active while the former is at rest. The Pancharatra tradition believes in the mixing of these two in pairs. That is, Jnana and Bala combine together. Aishwarya and Virya become a pair. And Shakti and Tejas form a third pair or third group. These three pairs play a prominent part in pure creation, which is the first type of creation which we're discussing here, which is called Shuddha creation. So corresponding to the three pairs of gunas, there arose three beings from Vasudeva. Sankarsana is issued forth from him with Jnana and Bala as his dominant gunas. So Vasudeva has all these six gunas in full, and he manifests those six gunas. Sankarsana manifests from Vasudeva, and he predominantly shows the gunas of Jnana and Bala, knowledge and strength. Pradyumna emanates from him and has Aishwarya and Virya, or leadership and prowess, right, as his two dominant gunas. And Aniruddha comes in as power and effulgence come out from him, Shakti and Tejas. So each one is Vasudeva himself. So, and has all six qualities, but the set of two gunas becomes dominant in each. So in other words, they're shown. So there are the other gunas are more hidden in each personality. The body of each is made up of six qualities. The four vyuhas are not different from one another, except for this fact that Sankarsana, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha have two distinct gunas each, dominant gunas. The emanations of the vyuhas are given in different texts in different ways. When Shakti opened eyes, that is, began to be active, Unmesha, which is a stage called Shakti Kosha, right? There arose Sankarsana representing the ego consciousness. All activities were dominant. Then Shakti was then Sankarshani with the names Shri and Shanta, possessing Jnana and Bala. The next stage of emanation from Shri is called Pradyumna, who is Purushottama. His consort then is Saraswati, whom Shakti represents having Virya and Aishwarya. Aniruddha is the name of the emanation from Saraswati. Shakti represents his consort with the name Rati, having Shakti and Tejas. Rati is also called Mahalakshmi. Aniruddha is said to be in the Maya Kosha. Each vyuha had two functions, creative and moral, concerned respectively with the origin of beings and the ethical progress. Creation is carried on by each with the help of Jnana, Aishwarya, and Shakti, while Bala, Kriya, Bala, Virya, and Tejas contribute the ethical progress. Creation precedes moral progress. Pure creation precedes other kinds of creation. So we're talking here about the Shuddha creation, the pure creation. And as such, the first of three gunas function at this stage. With the emanation of Sankarsana, creation is in its embryonic stage, having no internal distinctions. Purusha and Prakriti make their appearance with Pradyumna's manifestation. This does not mean that the material world is then produced. Only the Kutastha Purusha and Prakriti with subtle time, Shukshmakala, right, then come into being. These evolve further with the emanation of Aniruddha. Body and soul grow. Matter becomes Vyakta, and gross time, Stulakala, comes into being. That is, with Aniruddha's emanation becomes the stage of mixed creation. Apart from the work of creation, the three vyuhas have control over certain functions, but the texts offer conflicting accounts here. Creation, preservation, and destruction are respectively under the control of Aniruddha, Pradyumna, and Sankarshana, according to the Lakshmi Tantra, while the Vishvaksena Samhita mentions Aniruddha as the controller of preservation, Pradyumna and Pradyumna of creation. This discrepancy, this discrepant depiction will have to be explained on the ground that all the four vyuhas have all six qualities. When the interaction of all the six gunas with specific pairs of gunas are taken into account, the attribution of the function of gunas to the vyuha in question may lead to ascribing a function different from what it is expected to have. On the ethical side, Sankarshana teaches the theoretical side, Shastra, of the Agama. Pradyumna affects its practice, Kriya, and Aniruddha awards the fruits, Kriya Pala. Jnana, Virya, and Tejas are employed by the three vyuhas for these activities. Pradyumna introduces all the religious rites to be adopted by the followers of this Agama, while Aniruddha preaches about the science of the soul. Another aspect of the three vyuhas, which was criticized by Shankara and other writers, has disappeared gradually. The emanation of Sankarshana from Vasudeva is depicted as the birth of the self from the Lord, the birth of the individual soul from the Supreme Soul, the Atman from the Paramatman. This is the way it's sometimes depicted, and this is why Shankara criticized it. From Sankarshana, the self, the mind, or buddhi, the intelligence, is born as Pradyumna, and the ego as Aniruddha arises from Pradyumna. The gradual disappearance is stated by F. Otto Schrader, who's a German scholar who lived in Adyar, in the Adyar, it was under house arrest during World War I in the Adyar Library in Madras, and he wrote Introduction to Pancharatra Agamas and the Ahiribudnya Samhita, which is a very famous basic text on Pancharatra. So the gradual disappearance is stated by F. Otto Schrader as traceable to the difficulty of connecting the ahankara, or false ego, with such an absolutely pure being as a vyuha. It is doubtful whether this explanation is correct. The three deities superintend the activities of the soul, mind, and ego, which do not belong to the pure creation, right? So these three deities are not actually the source of these things, but they superintend the soul, the mind, and ego. They're the presiding deities over these things, but they're not actually emanations. The soul itself, or the mind or ego, are not emanations from, in the sense that the Sankarshana, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha are emanations from Vasudeva. So that's the reason why Shankara and other writers are incorrect, because they didn't understand this point. They misinterpreted this point. So this is hinted at in the following passage in Lakshmi Tantra 6:12b-13. Apart from the four vyuhas, there are sub-vyuhas, Keshava, Narayana, and Madhava, issue forth from Vasudeva. Govinda, Vishnu, and Madhusudana from Sankarshana. Trivikrama, Vamana, and Sridhara from Pradyumna, and Rishikesha, Padmanabha, and Damodara from Aniruddha. There's another set of sub-vyuhas, according to which from each vyuha, four deities arise, each having the same name as the vyuha, and two from each with the different names like Janardana, Upendra, Hari, and others. Okay, so we have the first group of vyuhas, Keshava to Damodar. Then after that, we have another set of upavyuhas with the same name as the original vyuhas, right? That means Vasudeva, Sankarshana, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. Then we get another 8 forms, which make up, so we have Vasudeva Namaha, Sankarshana Namaha, Pradyumna Namaha, Aniruddha Namaha, Purushottama Namaha, Hoksida Namaha, Narasimha Namaha, Chuta Namaha, Janardana Namaha, Upendra Namaha, Hari Namaha, Krishna Namaha. So these are the other 8. Yeah? So here he's just mentioned Janardana, Upendra, and Hari. But there are those other 8. So there are another 12. So we have 24 upavyuhas actually, all total. So under pure creation is included the Vivavas of the Lord. which represent the divine descents or avatars of the Lord, besides the 10 well-known descents, which are Matsya Kurma Varaha, Narasimha, Vamana Parashurama, Dasarati Rama, Balarama, Krishna, and Kalki, right? There are many which could be considered as subvivavas. Okay, so we talked about subvyuhas and subvivavas. So here we're talking about subvivavas. They are enumerated as 39 in number according to one text and 38 in another text. Both of the lists are identical except for different names for the same deity, the former having an additional deity, right, the one with 39, the list of 39, with the name of Shantatman. So apart from that, we have Kapila, Rahujit, Kalanemina, Parijatahara, Dattatreya, Nara, Narayana, Hari, and others are some of the well-known descents of God. Names like Sanak, Sanandana, Shuka, and Shonaka in the list belong to pious men or rishis, right, or sages or saints, who have God's power infused into them, which is called an Aveshavatar. These are not Purna avatars. The first ones are full avatars, are full Vivava avatars, right? But these other ones, which are also in the list, are which are mentioned in the Bhagavad Purana also. Some of them are Avesh avatars. They're what we also call Amsavatars. So they're partial incarnations or empowered incarnations. Avesha. Or they can be called Shakti Avesha, empowered with the energy of the Lord, particular energy. Right. The Padma Samhita, which is a very famous and often used text these days of the Pancharatra Agama, has the 39 descents named differently. Purushottama, Buddha, Dasharha, Shauri, Hayagriva, Vaikunta, Shakra, Srivatsa, Vishvaksena, and others are enumerated under this heading. It is interesting to note in this connection that among these sub-vivavas, Purusha, Satya, Achyuta are mentioned as emanating from Sankarshana, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. Purusha, Satya, and Achyuta. Okay. That means that the emanation is in the order of Vasudeva to Sankarshana, to Pradyumna, and Purusha, from Pradyumna and Aniruddha and Satya, and from Aniruddha to Achyuta. The Jayakya Samhita records that Parabrahman, right, is Vasudeva, from whom Achyuta takes his emanation. Satya, of shining body, rises from Achyuta, and Purusha emanates from Satya. Purusha is the inner controller of all beings and is the source of all the divine descents. All of them rest in Vasudeva. The process of emanation from Sankarshana and Aniruddha is reversed in the two lists noted above. The Sanat Kumar Samhita states that Purusha, Satya, Achyuta, and Aniruddha worship Sada Vishnu, or eternal Vishnu. On the other hand, the Vaikhanasa system treats Purusha, Satya, Achyuta, and Aniruddha as emanating from Vishnu, who is named Adimurti, and Vasudeva, Sankarshana, Pradyumna, Aniruddha, and Samba as 5 warriors or Veeras. Thus, it is found that the Vyuha deities of the Pancharatra get treated as subordinate to the Panchamurtis in the Vaikhanasa, and the Panchamurtis of the Vaikhanasa are Vivavas in the Pancharatra system. So once again, we see this rivalry between Pancharatra and Vaikhanasa in the doctrines also of the emanations of the Vyuhas in each system. In each one of them calls the main Vyuhas of the other system as subsidiary Vyuhas of their system. Interesting. So, however, the treatment of Purusha, Satya, and Achyuta as emanations from Vasudeva in the Jayakya Samhita could not be ignored in the light of the treatment given to them in the other Pancharatra texts. Perhaps the Jayakya records the oldest aspect of the Pancharatra tradition, which was not totally different from that of the Vaikhanasa. However, remember that we saw when we were discussing the Pancharatra and the Vaikhanasa Agamas that they may have come from a source which was originally one. However, one noteworthy feature is that both of the Agamas have recognized the concept of the primary deities in each other, though giving them subordinate position in their systems. The divine descents are grouped as primary and secondary. The former refer to those concerned with Vishnu's descent with non-material aprakrita body, and the latter to those in which the power of Vishnu takes possession of the body of a mortal. That's what we talked about before, the Shakti-Avesh avatar, or the Avesh avatar, also known as the Namsa avatar. In fact, there are three kinds of descents of the ultimate reality. And this is known, Gaudiya Vaishnavism might talk about this as being Swamsa and Vibhinamsa. So Swamsa means completely Vishnu Tattva, completely on the level of God, right? Completely an emanation of God, a complete incarnation of God or avatar. And Vibhinamsa means Vibhinamsa means a small part. Vibhina means very small. So like the Jivatman is also very small. So Vibhinamsa. So there's Swamsa and Vibhinamsa avatars. Okay. So all pervasive God, what we're saying here. In the fact, there are three kinds of descents of the ultimate reality, namely the supreme form, the Vyuha form, the Vibhava form, right? So these are the first three. So we had out of 5 in Pancharatra, we have Para, Vyuha, Vibhava. So that's what we're talking about. All pervasive God takes these forms to help his devotees. As he says in the Bhagavad Gita, Pritranaya sadhunam vinashaya chidaspitam dharma samstapanata. Yeah? I descend to protect the devotional, to destroy the miscreants, and the non-devotional, and to establish religion. So, all the descents spring from Aniruddha. Some texts declare that the descents of Matsya, Kuma, and Varaha are from Vasudeva. Those of Narasimha, Vamana, and Parashurama, and Rama from Sankarshana, that of Balarama from Pradyumna, and those of Krishna and Kalki from Aniruddha. Another version mentions the descent of Kurma and Parashurama from Sankarshana. So there's these different samhitas, and they have slightly different of ways of mentioning how God descends and how he emanates. In the Sanat Kumar Samhita, 2 sets of Vyuha emanations are depicted. The supreme deity is called Sada Vishnu, also known as Vasudeva, from whom there arises another Vasudeva with a definite form. So this could be equal to the Shukra and the Stula forms of Vasudeva that we talked about before. He is called as also Mahavishnu. From his mind arose the goddess Shanti, from whom came Sankarshana, the destroyer, also known as Shankara. From the left side of Sankarshana, there issued forth Pradyumna, also called as Brahma, who created Saraswati, the goddess of speech. Aniruddha, also called Purushottama, arose from her. Rati emanated from him, who, lying in the waters, bore a lotus in his navel. This represents a subtle kind of Vyuha. Then an egg came out of the lotus, and Hiranyagarbha, identical to the four-faced Brahma, arose out of it. From him arose a goddess with the name Sandhya, who gave rise to Rudra, also named Satya, and to Marichi and other progenitors, Prajapatis. Satya was born as the daughter of Daksha, one of those progenitors, one of those Prajapatis. From Satya arose Achyuta, who is identical with Pradyumna, from whom Aniruddha arose. This is the gross Vyuha emanation. So we have a subtle Vyuha emanation and a gross Vyuha emanation. This version of the Vyuha doctrine is very significant and of great importance. The accounts for the assumption of more than one Vasudeva and for accommodating the Panchaviras of the Vaikhanasa tradition, besides Rudra and Shankara, and Brahma and Saraswati, who do not normally have a place in Vaishnavism, are shown to have formed part of the evolution of the Vyuha doctrine. There is one more aspect deserving notice in the concept of the Vyuhas. 4 states mark out relative activity, and they are the inactive Shanta, the active Udita, spasmodically active, means occasionally active, the Shantodita, right? So which means Shanta Udita, right? So we have Shanta, active. Shanta, inactive, passive, peaceful. Active Udita, spasmodically active, which means sometimes peaceful, sometimes active. Shantodita. It's Shanta and Udita put together. And constantly active, Nitya. Nitya, always, or eternally, Nityodita. Para Vasudeva represents the inactive state. That is, the Shanta state. While the Vyuha shows the active state. The third stage is represented by Vyuha Vasudeva, and the remaining three emanations, Sankarshana, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha, is the last stage, or the Nityodita, right? So spasmodic, the Vyuha Vasudeva represents the Shantodita, and the Nityodita is represented by Aniruddha, Sankarshana, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha, which is the last stage. Inanimate objects also get treated as God himself. Vishnu is omnipotent, and so can descend into images made of metal, stone, and clay or mud. In his Vivavas, he gets down to this material world with a portion of his Shakti, of his power. Similarly, he occupies the images which are consecrated and installed. It is the request and prayer of suffering humanity that makes him come down, avatara, to this world. He removes the suffering and then quits the earth to get back to his own abode. The case of the images is slightly different. The devotee yearns to have his vision and be with him. For this purpose, God, the Lord, gets down into the images and stays on there, so that even after the passing away of that devotee, he continues to be present there. We're talking about immovable, permanently installed images here, not the chalamurtis, but the movable ones. This descent is technically not called Archa, the Archa avatar. So we talked about the Para, we talked about the Vyuha, we talked about the Vivava, right? We have not talked much about the Antayama, but now we're talking about the Archa avatar. Right, the body of God in this form is also called non-material or aprakrita, right? So it's considered non-material because originally that body is material, but through different processes, we conceive of it as being non-material, and we invite God to represent himself through to relate to us through that image, that deity. So here we have a couple more quotations from Lakshmi Chandra 259b to 60a and 431. A question is likely to be raised here regarding the propriety of accepting the form in an image made of material products as non-material, right? So somebody's going to say, how can you accept these forms of the deity, which are obviously material, as being non-material, aprakrita? The answer to this lies in the admission that a body for God in his divine descent, such as Rama, Krishna, and others, both the material, prakrita, and non-material, aprakrita, worlds belong to Vishnu. He whose body is made up of the six gunas takes up a body which falls within the experience of the selves. In this, his compassion and will are the guiding factors, as he is ever absolutely free from those factors, which are to be shunned, right? The bad qualities, right? The products made up of matter with its three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas, could not have any effect on him. Even though he took up his abode in a physical body when he descended down as Rama or Krishna, his body did not have any of the blemishes associated with the gunas of prakriti, right? Or the qualities of material nature. Or material elements. Similarly, he is said to take his place in the deity, which is consecrated according to the Agamic traditions, and as such, the deity becomes fit to be worshipped. It is not a stone or metallic form that is then God, but it is the figure which is to be looked upon as non-material in its making. Hence, the deity is called as the seat of the auspicious one, the Shubha Ashraya. And in divine and auspicious form, a divine or an auspicious form, Divya Mangala Vigraha. His body is the resting place of the material products. And Bhagavad Gita says, in Bhagavad Gita 11:13, it says, since his descent both in Vibhava and Archa form is not due to karma, right? His body, which he takes, then cannot be the product of matter, right? Because he doesn't descend because of a reason, because he's done some activity which gives him that particular body. So it's out of his own satya sankalpa, his true desire, his purposeful desire. So we have a couple of quotations here from Mahabharata Shanti Parva, 206, verse 68, it looks like, and the Varaha Purana chapter 34, verse 40. His body is the Vyuha, Vivava, and Archa manifestations. His body in the Vyuha, the Vivava, and the Archa manifestations has to be taken as non-material in its composition. The solution to this question is thus summarized in Vedanta Karikavali 6.8.10. The Lord is said to be the inner ruler or Antaryami, the supersoul of all selves, and is present in the heart of each of them. This concept is based on the Upanishads, which declare that Brahman is within every object and therefore is omnipresent and every self, and controls them from within. And there's a quotation here from Taitira Ranyika 228, I think, or 223, I'm not sure. Anta pravishta shashta. But he is unsullied by the impurities of the physical frames within the self rests, which the self rests from birth, by the impurities of the physical frames within which the self rests from birth to death. In the Pancharatra Agama, Lakshmi occupies a very prominent place. She is Shakti lying undeveloped in Vishnu before creation. When Vishnu takes his descents, she also descends along with him. The two are inseparable, as stated in Lakshmi Tantra 8.10. So when he is to play his own role, she manifests his nature. When she, in turn, has her role, he manifests his I-ness or his ahanta in her. When both have to function, they present themselves as the existent reality and its state of existence. When Aniruddha plays his role, she becomes known as Kamala. These two become the parents of the universe. She is called Shri when she occupies the lap of the two-armed Vasudeva. She is also present when on his sides with the names of Shri and Pushti. She takes several forms and occupies various positions around Vishnu, assuming particular names in each position. She becomes Ganga, or the Ganges, flowing out of the feet of Vishnu when he assumes the form of Trivikrama. In his descents as Varaha, Dharma, Vamana, Parashurama, and Rama, she came down as Bhu, as the earth, Bhargavi, Padma, Dharani, and Sita, respectively. So with Krishna, who was with Balarama, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha, she became Rukmini, Revati, Rati, and Usha, respectively. That the Supreme Being has for his consort Shri, otherwise called Lakshmi, is reiterated in many contexts in the Pancharatra texts, which do not fail to note that she is a form of Shakti and that many goddesses in the form of Shakti form her retinue. In this manner, she also is taken to be present along with Vishnu in his Vyuha, Vivava, Archa, and Antayaman forms, assuming different names. All these four are held as divine descents of the Lord and so include forms of Shri. Her forms also are not made of material products. These descents are intended to be meditated upon by the selves. There is no other purpose to be served in the awakening Unmesha of Shakti. To the pure creation belongs Vaikuntha, which is also known as the highest place, Paramapada, and which is beyond the sphere of the cosmic egg. It is also called as Tripada Vibhuti of Vishnu, right? Where 3/4 of God's manifestation are present, while a quarter of it represents the cosmic egg in which Aniruddha functions as a creator, right? So there's the Vaikuntha is 3/4. It's all unlimited, but it's considered to be 3/4, and the material world is considered to be 1/4. It comes into existence along with the Vyuhas and merges into the Lord at the time of the great dissolution. It's also called Nitya Vibhuti, which is an eternal manifestation in the sense that it is not created. It is distinct from the created world, this Leela Vibhuti, right? Which is called Leela Vibhuti, right? So distinction and the classification of Vibhuti as Nitya and Leela must be a later development. The word Mahavibhuti occurs in Lakshmi Tantra 17 looks like 17.5 or 17.8. And this has been taken to imply the above-mentioned classification. So the highest place is reached by the souls, which get absolutely free from worldly bondage. There, they are held to enjoy several kinds of communication with God. To be the abode of free selves, there must be matter, which can provide the places and the means, instrument of enjoyment, the Bhogasthana and the Bhoga Prakarna, Bhoga Upakarna, right? The enjoyments thus provided are stated to be blissful. Therefore, the Pancharatra Agama admits that the highest place comes into existence along with the viewers, and as such belongs to the pure creation. Remember, we talked about the Suddha creation, the pure creation? That is the creation of Sri Vaikuntha, although it's never created, right? But it is made of Suddha Sattva. It's made of pure matter, purified matter. It is not sattva. It is not sattva taken away from matter. It is not sattva taken away from matter, which is composed of the three gunas. That is matter purified by getting rid of rajas and tamas, but it represents the first stage in the evolution when the two other qualities did not even emerge. The places, the bodies with which the released souls get endowed and the enjoyments are all stated to be of the nature of knowledge and bliss. These should therefore be non-material or aprakrita. So there are non-material aprakrita bodies which can be inhabited by the eternally freed souls or the liberated souls, the muktas, right? Upon reaching moksha in Sri Vaikuntha. These are all Suddhasattva, made of Suddhasattva. It is further held that there is nothing there to become an obstacle to the mental functions of the released souls. Right, so there's no what we call jnana brahmsa. There's a thing called jnana brahmsa, which means an obstruction to knowing something, so that we are ignorant in some way. So there is no obstruction to knowledge. So that means knowledge is all expansive amongst the released souls, right, and the ever-free souls also, right. That the wishes of those souls get fulfilled invariably. The place is significantly depicted as solidified splendor. The heavenly abode, the body of the released soul, and the enjoyments, which are described to be of the nature of knowledge and bliss, having no obstruction to the fulfillment of the desires of the selves, must be totally distinct from those made up of and gained through the products of these three gunas here in the material world, these three rajas, tamas, and sattva in this material world, material modes. In the latter are found objects of three dimensions in this material world, the like of which should not be expected in the former, right? So it's a completely different. Atmosphere there. It's a completely different reality. If they are to be admitted there also, then obstructions of all kinds will have also to come in the way of the enjoyment of the released souls. So we can't accept that. So therefore, it is reasonable to assume that pure sattva is only self-luminous spiritual knowledge. That's what it is. That's what it's made out of. That this should be so is strengthened by the fact that matter emanates from Shakti or Shri, and so cannot have any tinge of material defect in the first stage of its emergence when it gets the name of Shuddhasattva, spiritual matter. This concept makes us understand how, out of it, the non-material bodies, the aprakrita, the spiritual bodies, emerge from Vishnu and others, and also from the released souls, and the creation of inanimate objects like parks, lotus tanks, and others for their enjoyment in Vaikuntha. All these are spiritual in content and are of the nature of knowledge and bliss. The highest place is called Vaikuntha, where is ever present the highest form or pada form of God. This form is said to be the very first and has two hands. So remember we talked about, this is the Shukshma Vasudeva form. But most people do call it Paravasudeva. So from this emanated the four-handed and dark-complexioned Lord, right? Remember that the Shukshma Vasudeva was crystalline spatika, was a shining, bright and white form, whereas the four-hand and had two arms, and then the four-handed form is dark complexioned here, right? So that is the Shtula Vasudeva. So from this emanated the four-handed and dark-complexioned god. The latter is generally supposed to be the para form with the name Vasudeva, from whom the Vyuhas and the divine descents emerge. So, so with the name Vasudeva, from whom the Vyuhas and divine descents emerge. He has the cells, matter, Mahat, Sattvika, and Tamasa, Ahankara, and others as Kaustubha, Srivatsa, Gada, Shankar, Shanga, which means the Kaustubha gem, the Srivatsa curl on his chest, the club, the conch, the bow, and other such weapons, Sudarshana, etc., and ornaments. Paravasudeva is stated to divide himself into Vyuha Vasudeva and Narayana. The Paravasudeva is ever associated with Shri, who is identical with Shakti. She too has a body made up of 6 divine gunas. This was already stated in the Ahirbuddha Samhita 625a and Ahirbuddha Samhita 931a. It mentions, according to some versions, Shri and Bhu are the 2 consorts. This is not borne out by the texts. As a part of Shakti, Bhu comes down as a consort of Vishnu in his Varaha avatara, when he comes as the great boar. Right? She's the goddess of the earth, right? Which he saves. So then in the Lakshmi Tantra 38b to 39a, Shakti assumes several names, one of which is called Mahi. In these names, she is present with Paravasudeva, and all are to be treated as his consorts. Neela came to be treated as one of his consorts in later Puranic literature. Neela, sometimes called Leela also, but Neela, right? Napinnai, which is a Tamil word, right? A cowherdess was won in a wager by Krishna and came to be known as Neela. So Neela, this Neela, Leela, she's also sometimes called Radha, like that, is this cowherdess who associated with Krishna during the Krishna Avatara. A later Upanishad named Neela Upanishad deals with all the aspects of Shakti. So here above, there was a discussion about Shakti here from Ahirbuddha Samhita and Lakshmi Tantra. Vishnu is said to have Shri ever with him. Lakshmi Tantra refers to Shri and Pushti being by his sides. Shri herself is said to be Pushti, representing one of the 8 forms taken by her, one for each direction in space, right? Okay, so there might be north, south, east, west. And then there are the other directions. There's usually up and down. There's usually 10 directions, but here it's said to be 8 directions. That's strange. So after the Lord rescued the earth from distress as Varaha, right, it was raised to the status of his consort and became designated as Bhudevi. Pushti, who occupied a place on one side of the Lord, came to be identified with Bhu. One of the earliest Samhitas refers to Shri and Pushti and not to Shri and Bhu. So that is a quotation from looks like from Parameshwara Samhita, Ishvara Samhita, and Sri Prashna Samhita. Okay. So if we continue on, 8 Shaktis are often mentioned. Kirti, Shri, Vijaya, Shraddha, Smriti, Meda, Dhriti, Kshama. Another list enumerates the names as Lakshmi, Saraswati, Sarva Kamada, Pritivardhini, Yasha, Shari, Shantida, Tustida, Pusti. The Satvara Samhita enumerates the names of Lakshmi, Pushti, Daya, Nidra, Shama, Kanti, Saraswati, Dhriti, I can't read it, something, ma something, Rati, Tushti, and Mati. Shakti is twofold, namely Bhuti and Kriya. The word Bhuti means becoming, and Kriya means acting. The form of Sri Lakshmi is divided in many ways. The latter is the Sudarshana discus of Vishnu, right? Representing Vishnu's will. It is undivided. It keeps the former working on from creation till dissolution. So here we have also some quotations from Lakshmi Tantra 29.9a, 29.8a, and Ahirbuddha Samhita 3.45b. Okay. So also the 8 Lakshmis are also enumerated in Sri Prashna Samhita as Mahalakshmi, Veera Lakshmi, Dana Lakshmi, Santana Lakshmi, Jaya Lakshmi, Danya Lakshmi, Vairya Lakshmi, and Rajya Lakshmi. So we see, if you go to Madras, you'll see that there's an Astalakshmi temple on the beach in southern Madras where you can, or Chennai, where they have the Astalakshmi temple. Interesting. So the Lakshmi Tantra, however, treats Kriya Shakti as fourfold, shared by the sun, fire, moon, and Sudarshana, the discus weapon of the Lord. The importance of Sudarshana in the doctrinal aspect of the Panchrattra is very great, as it is evidenced in the treatment of Sudarshana in all aspects like mantra and worship in the texts, and in the separate shrines for Sudarshana in South Indian temples dedicated to Vishnu. There is in the highest heaven a pillar called Vishaka Yupa. Yupa is a type of pillar, a sacrificial post, actually, Yupa, or Brahma Yupa. It is an effulgence of light and identical with Bhagavan. It has 4 faces, each facing one direction. That part which faces the eastern quarter is occupied by Bhagavan, Vasudeva, with a white form surpassing the splendor of the sun. The form of Sankarshana, whose complexion is similar to the color of a ruby, so dark red, occupies the south-facing part. The part facing the west represents Pradyumna, whose form is red, as if scorched by the hot red sun. Aniruddha, whose complexion is like that of the autumnal sky, occupies the north-facing part. The Supreme Lord, mentioned here as Adimurti, is present in all those whose brilliance is equal to crores or tens of millions of suns. Further, each part has 4 divisions, the lowest one occupied by Pradyumna, Sankarshana, and Vasudeva. Each vyuha represents a state of consciousness. Vasudeva's domain is Turiya. Turiya means the impersonal Brahman, right? Where there is no polarization. Sankarshana's is Sushupti. Remember that the souls, right? Sankarshana is in charge of the soul. So the souls are there within the body of the Lord as in Sushupti, in deep sleep, during the time of dissolution. Revealing the first and faint signs of polarization, Pradyumna's is Swapna. Swapna means sleep, with subtle polarization. And Aniruddha's is called Jagrat. Jagrat means awakening or awakened state. So we have the awakened state, the sleeping state, the dreaming state, awakening state, the dreaming state, the deep sleep, and the fourth state, which is the completely devoid of consciousness state, called Turiya. With Jagrat, with full but limited polarization. For instance, that part which faces the north has Aniruddha in full prominence, but occupying the bottom, the other 3 not being as prominent as Aniruddha. Similarly, the west face gives prominence to Pradyumna, occupying the 2nd division from the bottom, while the other 3 do not have that importance. The same must be said of the other 2 faces, the 4 states of consciousness: waking, sleeping, dreaming, and transcendental, right? So that they equate to what we just talked about, the Jagrat, Swapna, Sushupti, and Turiya. Characterize the 4 faces directed to the north, west, south, and east, respectively. So, this pillar is intended to be contemplated upon by devotees according to their capabilities. Those who meditate upon the waking state of consciousness as represented by Aniruddha are required to treat all the 4 deities as identical with the Supreme Being. Each deity having a distinct character and occupying one face of the column incorporates all the 4 vyuhas. For instance, the form of Aniruddha occupying the face directed to the north must display prominent features like the consort, weapons, and ornaments, while those of Pradyumna, Sankarshana, and Vasudeva must reveal similar features as indistinct, aspashta, right, merely outlined and totally invisible. The west face must have the features of Pradyumna prominently displayed, with those of the other 3 relatively less prominent. Similarly, the south and east-facing portions display the prominent features of Sankarshana and Vasudeva respectively. Accordingly, less importance to these others. Okay, so these are all part of the yoga portion of the Pancharatra, because they're meditations that we have to that are recommended in the Pancharatra. So, continuing on, a meditator is required to contemplate at 4 stages, starting with that of Aniruddha and the other 3 as depicted in the north face, and gradually passing through to Pradyumna, Sankarsana, and Vasudeva, keeping all the other 3 in each. Each stage corresponds to another stage in the other set. That is waking, dream, deep sleep, and transcendental consciousness, right? The meditator has to raise himself to the state of consciousness, to that state of consciousness, which is represented by the stage concerned. This kind of meditation is called Chaturatmya Upasana. An explanation is required to be given about the admission of this Vishaka Yupa, which is the name of this meditational column, right? As distinct from the 4 viewers, just as one step follows another in succession while one walks along, so also one viewer follows another. The interval between them is not a void. It is charged with brilliant energy of God who manifests himself through its serving for his body. It has the 6 gunas and is called the Vishaka Yupa, this pillar. Lakshmi Tantra 11, 11, and 12, right, mentions that this luster pervades not only the intervals between the viewers, but also the viewers. Hence, the Vishaka Yupa is distinct from the 4 viewers, which form part of it, and at the same time, branch off from it like the branches of a tree. The Vishaka Yupa is also said to represent absolute sound, out of which arise the sounds of the 4 stages. There are 4 stages in sound: Nada, Bindu, Madhyama, and Vaikari. Okay, so we're getting close to Spota theory here. So for those of you who don't know anything about the meanings here, they'll be explained. Presiding respectively over by the viewer deities starting from Vasudeva. This representation is justifiable because some prominent features of the viewer deities, such as imperceptibility, bare outline, indistinct appearance, and full perceptibility, are also the features of sound in these 4 stages. What are the 4 stages against? Nada, Bindu, Madhyama, and Vaikari. So the term Vishaka Yupa, which we're still talking about, is made up of 2 words, Vishaka and Yupa. The former denotes that of which the branch is spread out. And in this sense, it has relevance to the word Yupa, which primarily means a sacrificial post. Sacrificial post is a piece of wood that the sacrificial animal is tied to, like that. So here, it's the meditation of the person has to meditate upon this. So the sense of the compound word must be taken as that which has all-pervading luster, out of which the viewers extend on the 4 sides. It is thus the source and must be taken to stand for Paravasudeva, or rather to Parabrahman, that is to Sri Krishna Vasudeva and Stula Vasudeva, taken collectively. This deity is identified with Purusha, who is none other than Narayana. The Purusha Sukta speaks of creation as a symbolic sacrifice. The same principle is applicable to this concept of Vishaka Yupa, the Yupa, which is a sacrificial pillar, whereas the Supreme Being is in the form of the luster without a body and represents the sacrificial pillar. The word Vishaka must be taken to mean a particular form taken up by that pillar. Primarily, it stands for the name of one of the lunar asterisms, right? One of the stars, Vishaka, right? Figured by the decorative gateway or arch, and containing 4 or originally 2 stars placed under the regency of a dual divinity. Thus, indicating the Vishaka Yupa, there are 5 deities. They represent the 5 letters, Sha, Sha, Sa, and Ha with Sha, right? So these are the 5 last letters of the Sanskrit alphabet. The sibilants and the aspirate and the conjunct consonant Sha. So the Arya-Buddha Samhita 1683b and 80 to 85 tells us, it is held by some scholars that the Vishaka Yupa concept is evolved to fill in the central places where the four Vyuha deities got their assigned places, one in each quarter, and that this, along with the four Vyuha deities, would justify the significance of the number 5 occurring in the name Pancharatra. The Vishaka Yupa in the middle and the four deities around it makes up the 5 in the Pancharatra. And so this is an idea given in Sanjukta Gupta's translation of Lakshmi Tantra, which we can have a look at sometime. So, however, this explanation seems unnecessary. Firstly, it must be admitted that the Vishaka Yupa concept has evolved more to help concentration of the mind for contemplation than for explaining the Vyuha concept. The meditation is not simply on the lustrous pillar. On the other hand, each deity of the Vyuha is to be meditated upon as forming part of the whole Vyuha. The Vishaka Yupa may be taken to stand for Paravasudeva, who does not form part of the Vyuha, and the 4 stages of consciousness are alone mentioned here for meditation upon the 4 Vyuha deities and not 5. Secondly, the analogy from the Vaikhanasa text is interesting. No doubt the Vyuha principle is involved in the emanation of Purusha from Vishnu, to be followed by Satya, Achyuta, and Aniruddha. But all the 5 are together called Panchamurti and not as Vyuha. That's hardly the same, right? So lastly, in all religious schools, each number has a significant role to play. For instance, Ekam Eva Advitiyam Brahma, which means that the one without a second is Brahma, right? Shows the importance of the number 1 in the Vedanta system. This is not taken to mean the denial of duality or of the concept of Tattva-traya. The 3 Tattva-trayas means Chitta, Chitta, and Ishvara, right? God, the souls in the world, right? Of the Vyuha concept of 4 deities, or of the 5-fold classification of the day, and so on, right? So we had the 5-fold classification of the day, remember, which is the Abhigamana, Upadana, Ija, Swadhyaya, and Yoga, right? Also, we have that in the Vaikhanasa. We have the five Vyuhas of the Vaikhanasa. So there's meaning to 1, there's meaning to 2, there's meaning to 3, there's meaning to 4, and there's meaning to 5. All of these numbers have meanings, right? Of course, the name Pancharatra has a unique significance, but the importance given to other numbers like 4 in the number of Vyuhas, 6 in the number of gunas, and Sadakshara mantra, which is Om Namo Vishnave, right, which 6-syllable mantra, 8 in the Astakshara mantra, Om Namo Narayanaya, and 12 in the Dvarasakshara mantra, the 12-syllable mantra, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, are not less significant. So all of these numbers have significance, apart from just the number of syllables or the number of qualities or the number of emanations. The Vishaka Yupa is a Chaturatmya concept, a Chaturatmya concept. It's a concept of four aspects of God, 4 Atmyas, right? And does not involve an independent 5th principle brought in here, right? So this idea by Sanjukta Gupta in Lakshmi Tantra that it represents the 5 in the word Pancharatra, he doesn't accept that, right? Because really the Vishaka Yupa is a Chaturatmya, a concept, which is talking about 4. All these form part of pure creation, which is non-material, aprakrita, and if some of them have found room in the world created out of matter in the process of impure creation, it must be understood that the purity of these is not affected in the least. So now we're going to continue on. We're going to talk about impure, based on the pure creation. So this was a discussion of the pure creation. Now we're going to talk about mixed creation and the impure creation, like that. So I think this is maybe a good place to stop. So that was really, really complicated. And we see that there are different Pancharatra Samhitas that describe the same thing in slightly different terms. And there may be some concepts which are a little bit different, and there's reasons for that. they can be rationalized, and we can work out exactly what they mean. But most of this has to do with the tattva and the jnana and the yoga sections of the Pancharatra, and not to do with the Kriya and Charya sections. So, any questions?
Thanks, is it that originally they...
It's complex. Huh? It's
yeah,
complex.
Very complex. Very, very complex. Yeah. Is it that originally then that they're saying that Brahman, because they're describing that, the first form to come out from the Brahman, is it that they're saying that the Brahman then is formless originally then?
There are some scriptures which may say like that, right? And he was describing some of them there. Okay, it's not, but it's not. It's difficult to say. It's difficult to say because we're also talking about. It also talks about the souls emanating from a certain aspect of the Lord too. But when we look at it in more detail, the souls are coming out at the time of creation, but they were just inside the body of God during the time of pralaya, during the time of dissolution. So it's not that the souls were actually created, right? And then again, in the Upanishads, it does say in the beginning there was one and the one became many, like that. So there has to be a concept of the one. There are different concepts of the one. So as we see, there's a concept, but normally in Pancharatra, he's described normally in Pancharatra, he's describing how Vasudeva is got two hands and is the original form of Godhead. But here he's described something else from different samhitas. So he's just describing what's there in different samhitas. We have to put them all together and understand them.
Yeah, because I found it also quite interesting how the first form, the subtle form, has two hands and then becomes four hands. And I'm just thinking that it's interesting that why it is that, we say Para Vasudeva is the highest form. How come we don't actually say that it's, Sriman Narayana instead of Para Vasudeva? Why don't we just say Sriman Narayana as the supreme form? Because we know that Narayana itself means, he who pervades everything from inside and outside, also. So
yeah,
I wonder why.
Sri Vaishnavism is a school and has a philosophy and has doctrines and things like that, and it accepts the ideas of the Pancharatra Agama, but the Pancharatra Agama, there are some Pancharatra Agamas which may seem slightly different to what's accepted in Sri Vaishnavism. For instance, in Pancharatra Agama, the most important mantra is the Dvalasakshara mantra, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Whereas in Sri Vaishnavism, the most important mantra is the eight-syllable mantra, Om Namo Narayana. So there are differences between Pancharatra Agama and pure Pancharatra Agama and Sri Vaishnavism. Sri Vaishnavism adopts many of the aspects of Pancharatra Agama, but maybe not all the aspects of Pancharatra Agama. But we're not denying Pancharatra Agama, but we have to see if there's any light between the doctrines of the Pancharatra and the actual practice of Sri Vaishnavism. We have to see. What we're trying to do is we're trying to understand from the original texts of the Pancharatra Agama what doctrines are. We're not trying to understand from Ramanuja's commentaries or from the commentaries of later acharyas.
Okay, well, that clarifies basically the next question, which was basically how one can see Lakshmi, in the mode of goodness, and in Saraswati Rajoguna, and Kali or Parvati in Tamoguna, and which is the general Hindu concept. And I was thinking, if it is that we can see the goddess like that, then we see Vishnu or Narayana also then, associated with Shiva or Shankar being Tamoguna, etc., etc. But as you're saying, is that
Shiva is a Tamaguna avatar and Brahma is a Rajaguna avatar. Sometimes those positions might be taken up by sometimes they might be Avesh avatars, they might be Ams avatars, they might be Shaktivesh, there might be some different types of empowered living beings, or the God might take that position himself.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I thought it would have been I think Gaudiya Vaishnavas would really, really love the fact that the first form to come out is a two-handed form. So I was also thinking about.
Yeah. Just go to Sri Rangam and you go in the temple there. How many hands?
Ranganatha has two hands. That's what they say. They say, oh, Ranganatha is, he's Krishna. Of course, he's Krishna, but they say, oh, Ranganatha is Krishna. You see, he only has two hands. And then they say, Lord Venkateshwar, he only has two hands, actually.
Yeah, but Rama also had two hands, so we don't necessarily. You don't have to be Krishna to have two hands.
Mm-hmm.
And if you talk to Tirunarayan and talk to Dr. Iyengar and everything like that, they'll talk about Krishna in the Mahabharata had four hands.
Yeah.
So Krishna actually has four hands, whereas many people think he has two hands. And anyway, these are all different concepts, and this is getting into theology here, and we have to have a good grounding in philosophy, the philosophy of the Upanishads, to understand. And then on top of that, we lay the theology, and the theology is less important than the philosophy ultimately. But theology, I think theology is acceptable in different forms. So because we know people worship Brahma, people worship Krishna, people worship Narasimha, people worship four-handed forms, two-handed forms, six-handed forms, eight-handed forms, 16-handed forms, 32-handed forms. There's all these different forms like that. So more heads and more hands just tend to tell us, they tend to tell us that God can observe more, he can think more, and he can do more action like that. This is the meaning. This is the meaning of having so many different arms, right?
Yeah,
like that. So whether we literally have to believe that there was a form of Narasimha with 16 hands or 32 hands or 1,000 hands or whatever it is like that, or whether it's just a meditation for us to understand his unlimited potency. It's we have to see it in different ways. So
thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. It's a very nice way of explaining it also, and understanding it, that the more important, you must have the philosophical grounding and the foundation, or else all of this becomes so confusing.
Yeah, and this book is a survey. This book is a survey of things that are there in the original text of the Pancharatras. So some Samhitas become more important than others to Sri Vaishnavas. And there may be some discrepancies. Look at how the Vaikhanasa and the Pancharatra are a little bit political, and they take each other's concepts and make them a lesser. They accept them, but they accept them as sort of a lesser form in their own system. They try to make their system as more important than the other system.